I'm vetoing that. I am. Cool. All right. Good morning, everyone, or anyone, if anyone can hear me. We're Heather and I are we're doing some new stuff here on Ask the Agronomist this morning, and I have a bit of a dislike for new things on Ask the Agronomist because they never go quite as smoothly as we hope. So bear with us here a moment. We're Cal and Jennifer would be proud. You know, we're using an iPad to broadcast. We can zoom in. We've got a screen with things displayed on a screen. Um, Heather is here with me, frantically trying to make this work. Believe it or not, we actually came here 2 days ago for about an hour, Heather,
Yes.
and prepped and practiced and researched and studied and got prepared. Which getting prepared is not something I normally do, so that was a little out of my comfort zone. And it feels like we didn't get prepared, but believe it or not, it would be worse than this had we not spent that time here. But there was one key piece of making this happen that we didn't test 2 days ago that turned out to be a bit of a snafu here this morning. So Heather is frantically pulling things together. We have a goal of sharing some quality agronomic information with you here this morning. Hopefully you can see the beautiful trial picture behind me on the screen. Being able to show you that picture in all of its glory is actually the primary motivation for all the different things we're doing here this morning. And once we figure out how to do this well, this may become the new way we do this. I don't know. Based on the first 5 minutes, we'll never doing it again. But it'll, trust me, it'll get better, I hope. So how does it look, Heather?
Can you? Good.
Okay.
We've got 6 people on here.
Okay. All right. So there's a few witnesses to our disaster here. So we're going to primarily talk about fungicide today. We're going to talk about primarily corn fungicide. We're going to talk about how you evaluate your fungicide program. We'll talk about evaluating hybrids. We're going to talk some about selecting hybrids. We're going to talk about what is affecting performance this year relative to fungicide and disease. And all of this conversation depends a lot on where you are at. If you are in the Monmouth area, northwest of Monmouth, diseases, particularly a combination of tar spot and southern rust, are really the performance of corn, especially hybrids that protection from a fungicide from one or both of those diseases. One or the other is not horribly awful, but when you've got both of them working on your plant, and heaven forbid, if you've got tar spot and southern rust killing your leaves while crown rot is infecting and killing your root system, that is a devastating combination. And that's, that's where we end up with sub 200 bushel corn in some cases. Some of you have been harvesting some close to 300 bushel corn. Maybe you've seen 300 bushel yields in plots. Maybe you haven't heard of anybody with sub 200 bushel corn. And if that's the case, you happen to be farming in a part of the state that doesn't have as heavy a disease pressure as northwestern Illinois does. And so Monmouth is kind of a line. As you go north and west of Monmouth, things drop off dramatically from a yield perspective, unless you did a really, really, really aggressive fungicide program. And when I talk really aggressive, that would mean a good product. That would mean a full rate of a good product. That would mean very timely applications, and timely means early. And it might mean sequential applications. It might mean, did you use a ground rig versus an aerial application? How did you apply it? What volume did you apply it at? What rate did you use? What product did you use? What stage of growth did you apply at? So, for example, we talk about the window of tassel time applications being from VT to R1. That's our window. Some people will stretch that window out to R2. So VT would be when the tassel starts coming out of the top of the plant. R1 would be pollination. So that's when you've got pollen shed, you've got green silks, you maybe aren't done pollinating yet, you are just in pollination. That's R1. So what we call the window would be from the time the tassel starts coming up until the time you're done pollinating. And that would be about a 10-day-ish window typically. R2 would be, kind of the blister stage. That would be brown silk. And if you extend that window to R2, you're going to pick up a couple more weeks of window. So if you consider your window to be VT to R2, it's about a 3-week window. If you consider your window to be VT to R1, it's about a 10-day window. And this year, especially as you go north, especially where tar spot got started early, we're seeing a benefit to tar spot protection from a V5 application, which is kind of rare, but we're seeing it this year. We're seeing a benefit to applications at tassel being better than at R1. And if you waited until R2, that was way too late. Now, Southern Rust is a little bit different because Southern Rust comes in a little later. Tar spot, you got to be early on. Southern Rust, didn't get started quite as early. So unfortunately, with the combination of Southern Rust and tar spot, when tar spot gets started in June, Southern Rust can go through August, and tar spot, once it gets started, never really quits going. You've got two very lethal diseases that can be active throughout, a large part of the grain fill or the R stages of corn, and that that combination this year with the environment that we had being very conducive with all the rainfall that we had in late June and July, all the humidity we had, all the cloudy days we had, all the humid days, all the foggy days, all the days even when it wasn't raining, it was just damp, and that created the perfect environment for disease development. And there's a huge range hybrids as far as their resistance goes to Southern Rust. There is less of a range in hybrids as far as their resistance to tar spot goes. Everything is susceptible to tar spot. It's just varying degrees of susceptibility. With Southern Rust, you can buy hybrids that are pretty highly resistant to Southern Rust. Doesn't mean they're immune, but there's a lot more, the difference between the best Southern Rust and the worst Southern Rust hybrid is a lot greater than the difference between the best tar spot hybrid and the worst tar spot hybrid. And there's a lot of them that aren't much different than the worst tar spot hybrid. So when you have that combination of diseases, which we did this year, and the last time we had that combination of diseases was 2021, and 2021 and 2025, as the season has progressed, are looking more and more and more and more similar. And some people with disease issues in 2021. But if you were farming in the Monmouth area in 2021, you know what I'm talking about. And if you're farming in the Monmouth area again this year, you know what I'm talking about. And as you go north and west of Monmouth, it's the same or worse as you go that direction. So this trial, I'm going to give one of my colleagues, Kevin Rosine, a lot of credit here, and not take any for myself because I didn't do a damn thing other than put this slide up on the wall here. This is a really, really, really interesting trial, a really good trial. There's about 20 different hybrids out there. So this is basically a large strip trial. This is in an 80-acre field on his family's farm. This is a few miles west of Monmouth. So this would be in what I call the dead zone as far as, disease pressure this year. It doesn't get much worse than northwest of Monmouth. And then my computer just went to sleep. Okay. Even though when we were practicing the other day, we changed the setting in my computer so that it's supposed to be awake for 2 hours. And it somehow reverted back to the 12 minutes that is the factory default setting, I believe. All right. So every now and then, rub that for me. It sounds dirty, but it wasn't. Okay. So back to bragging about Kevin's trial. So there you can kind of see in this picture there's actually 6 different treatment blocks in this field. And so these are half-mile long rows, basically chunked up into 6 equal distant sections. When they harvested this trial, they actually picked crossways through right between these blocks. And so when they were harvesting, they knew when they came to the end of the block. And they've got different treatments out here. This is NDVI imagery. This is not a yield map. So in this case, and we'll show some data here in a minute, in this case, usually NDVI imagery correlates very closely to yield data. And in this case, I'm a little bit surprised that we had this much of a greening effect with the sequential R1 and R3 application, but we didn't see really a yield increase from that, which is really rare this year. And I don't exactly know why we didn't, because most people who have tried a sequential application this year, I've heard yield reports as high as 40 bushel yield increases from that sequential application. And if you look at this imagery, you would say, boy, that's going to yield a lot more than this. Now, the combine didn't show that. Now, we did have a lot better plant health here. My theory is we were so dry late that even though that plant was in better shape, even though that plant was greener, even though that plant was healthier, even though that plant lived longer, it was so dry by that point in the growing season, it really couldn't make use or take advantage of the fact that it was healthier and doing better. So when we show the data, the average yield of this block and the average yield of this block are actually identical, according to the weigh wagon. Doesn't look like that in the picture. Not usually that way, but that's the way it worked out here. So we're going to show data from 4 different treatments from this trial. We're going to look at untreated. We're going to look at a V5 only, which is not our recommendation, but it did have a nice response in this trial. And Jim Donnelly has told me that in Northern Illinois, V5s are having a huge benefit this year because the tar spot got started so early. He thinks they actually got some early tar spot suppression from their V5 applications, which I wouldn't normally count on that, but it's more likely to happen in Northern Illinois where the corn's a little later and the tar spot's a little earlier than here in Central Illinois. And this is kind of a remarkable year, but in years where you're finding, I mean, Jim was finding tar spot the middle of June. So that V5, especially if it was maybe like a V6 or a V7 instead of a V5, was actually on the front side of when tar spot was getting started. And so we did see some benefit, more than typical of the V5. And then we'll look at a VT, actually it was R1 at this site, an R1 application. All these applications were made with a drone, with the exception of the V5. That would have been in a field sprayer with the herbicide pass. All of the later post applications were made with a drone. Thanks to Sean Lee for providing those services for us. And believe it or not, this plot is big enough that you could have harvested it with a yield monitor, but the Rosines had a brand new combine, weren't really comfortable with the calibration on the yield monitor, didn't want to foul up this trial. So believe it or not, there's over 120 individual plots out there. They weigh wagoned every one of those. So there's actual scale data through a weigh wagon from this trial. So tremendous amount of work. Now, people are, as soon as people saw this, Kevin's got many requests from dealers and farmers. Hey, I want to do one of those next year. I don't know how many of these Kevin wants to sign up for, but there's a lot of excitement, a lot of interest, and I can tell you what's going to happen, because this is what happened in 2022 when we ran out and did a whole bunch of trials that we wished we would have done in 21. That's a good way to make sure you don't have disease on your farm, is to go to this amount of work to do a fungicide trial. Pretty good chance you won't have heavy disease pressure if you go to the effort of doing this next year. So we're going to get into some data. Heather's got some cool pictures that she's going to show here. You can shut that off however you want to, because I'm just going to write the data on the board. Okay. So again, we're going to look at no fungicide. We're going to look at V5, and the V5 was 4 ounces of Delaro. We're going to look at R1, which was 10 ounces of Delaro Complete. And then we're going to look at R1 plus R3, which was obviously the same 10 ounces plus an additional 8. Both Delaro Complete. Okay, so we got 5 different hybrids here. I'm just going to call them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for now. No fungicide, they went 242.7, 231, 239.2, 229.8, 238.1 for an average yield of 236.2. And honestly, and this was third-year corn. In this part of the world, 236, third-year corn with no fungicide, that's above average, I would say. So that's pretty good for this year. So if we apply a V5, we went to 260.9, which that's a very unusually large response to a V5. We went to 245.6. We went to 251.5. We went to 236.1. We went to 242.6. Average yield of 247.3. The increase from the V5 application, 11.1 bushels. Do not count on that on your farm. I usually count on 4 or 5. Sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 0. 4 or 5 is pretty common. 11 is a much larger response than normal. I've seen as high as 50 in individual weird situations. So, V5 doesn't always give you 11 bushels of corn. It almost always gives you enough to pay for it. It is the cheapest. It is the easiest application to make. It is the first application I would make, especially if you plant your corn in April. Now, if you wait until May 5th or after to plant your corn, I don't know that you need the V5. Now, this year probably would have still benefited from the V5, but again, this is kind of an exceptional year. So now let's get into the big numbers. So we made an R1 application. So this is an R1 only. So this isn't V5 plus R1. This is just R1. 265.4, 265.3, 287.4, 278, 275.8, average 274.4, yield delta 38.2 bushel. So you can see in every hybrid, we've had a dramatic stair-step increase each time we did it. Now let's go out to the full Monty here, the R1 plus R3, and this is the one that I'm gonna be honest with you, doesn't make sense. But sometimes when you do field research, it doesn't make sense. You remember how green that block was in the picture. And when I get these numbers up here, you will be able to see that we accomplished the exact same yield of 274.3. So this ended up with exactly the same tenth of a bushel less yield increase as the R1 alone. So obviously your best ROI was right here in this case. Now, again, this is highly unusual. Now, in a lot of years, that's what the data shows. When we've done sequential applications in like years like 22 and 23 and 24, that's about what you get. You don't see much of a response out of that second shot. But in a year like 2025, most people that did a sequential saw a big benefit. And looking at the NDVI map, there should have been a benefit here too. I don't have a good explanation as to why there wasn't, but I'm being honest with you with the data. That's what the data said. And like I said, these are all scale weights. This isn't even yield monitor data. This is actually through a scale. But just a really, really interesting trial, you know, and you can see some hybrid trends in here. You know, if you want to pick out the one that was the best, unsprayed, you know, ended up being one of the worst when you put a lot of fungicide on. Now, you still got a nice response. That's over 20 bushel. So good ROI on that application. But you compare that to one like this one, which was the worst unsprayed. Now, it wasn't the best sprayed, but that's 48 bushel yield increase on that hybrid. So we've tried to rate hybrids for their fungicide response in the past. And when you've got a year where fungicides are really responsive like this, it's not that hard to do. But every year is different. Every location's different. And when you start trying to do this over years and across locations, you can pull your hair out because it just gets really, really difficult. And honestly, this hybrid right here, I'll tell you what it is. This is 11235. This is a new DeKalb hybrid. I've got some locations where it looks like that hybrid doesn't need to be sprayed. It is that healthy. But even though I've got locations where it looks like it didn't need to be sprayed, we still got a 23 bushel yield increase by spraying it. So, you know, the ROI is 2x on this one, what this one is, but you still want to spray this one too, even though it would have done better unsprayed than anything else up here. And it did have a smaller fungicide response than some of these other hybrids did. So if there's questions, please chat them in. Heather's doing multi-duty here today, but she can keep an eye on the chat as well. We're going to jump into some other trials and kind of keep talking on this same topic. There's a lot of this kind of data out there this year. Maybe you've got some on your own farm. I know we've got a lot more trials. Some of them haven't even been harvested yet. That's another thing that. Oh, wait a minute. We got to show our pictures. Heather, you want to walk us through your slides? So Heather actually was in this trial twice during the growing season. I'll flip the lights off. You're gonna have to look back at it. Oh yeah, of course I am. If anybody watching knows how to, you know, permanently change the settings on a computer, chat it in so I fix this. You all can't see this, but my ex-wife's maiden name is still my password. Heather's embarrassed for me. Okay, let's see. So we're done with that. And we'll bring up this and slide. Voila. Okay, so I'll let Heather narrate this part.
A little bit. Okay, so this was a trial that I worked with Kevin on, and ironically enough, on August 21st, we did an Ask the Agronomist here in Monmouth, and I left and I drove over to this trial, which is about 4 miles.
She didn't tell me she was going to this really cool trial. She just snuck out there all by herself.
Well, I didn't know it was really cool.
It wasn't then. It was just normal.
As cool then.
Right.
I mean, you could definitely see a lot of and maybe you can't see on this picture because of the greeniness, but you could see some plant response. I believe that this was hybrid 1 on the data there, which is 11235.
So was this
This is the untreated.
Okay, so you can see. I mean, there's some dead leaves in there. You know, compared to that, hopefully you can see that difference. I mean, this doesn't look awful, but that looks a lot better. But keep in mind, this is August 21st. So keep that date in mind. Heather's going to go through a few more pictures.
Okay, so this was another one. This would have been hybrid 5 on Lance's data.
Mm-hmm.
So this again is untreated and then treated. And so you can see a little bit more. You could definitely, it's not as healthy as hybrid A.
You can see a lot of those lower leaves are starting to drop down, which that means they're being cannibalized. It's already reallocating stored sugars and nutrients out of those leaves. It's sacrificing its lower canopy to try to keep the rest of the plant going. This treated plant, lower canopy is still working, still contributing to society, and but you can see little bit of disease and dead leaves in there too, but lot better than this. But again, we're still August 21, so same date, just a couple different hybrids, showing that we were already starting to see some of the hybrid differences that would get much greater as the season progressed. And this would have been in that time frame when a lot of people were asking, should I have sprayed a second time? And at this time, you should have already done the second application. This would have been, in my opinion, too late. This would have been towards the end of the window of when it would have been helpful to make a second application. And so the reality is, when we're trying to decide if we need a second application, your corn's not going to look like it needs a second application. You can't wait until it looks like it needs a second application. And we think we've got some indicators. So, what does unsprayed corn look like? What's the weather been like? How early was tar spot here? How bad is southern rust? How bad is tar spot? What's it look like in northern Illinois? How susceptible is the hybrid? We think we've got some ways to help you make that decision so that you're not totally flying blind. But you cannot wait until it looks like it needs sprayed.
Yes. And ironically enough, on this day, I remember you said, I don't think tar spot is in this area. And then I went out to this plot, and I think Rachel might have even been on with you. And I said, I think tar spot is in this area.
You can always find tar spot when Rachel's with you.
Yes. So then we weren't able to get Kevin out to look at that plot. So I left that day, super excited, called everybody under the sun to talk about how cool this trial was. And so this is September 3rd.
How many days later is that? Like what? 12? 13?
So not even 2 weeks.
Not even 2 weeks.
Not even 2 weeks. And I knew we needed to get back out there and look at it like sooner than later, but it was Labor Day, blah, blah, blah. So this is that first hybrid that we looked at that looked pretty good. I believe. Actually, no, this is hybrid B. I think.
Yeah, that's not A.
This is the 117 day.
Yeah.
So this is actually, I messed that up. We were kind of late getting this in here, but so this is how fast, even from the picture before, that we went into not looking so great.
And this, this particular hybrid would be one of the more disease challenged ones of the hybrids here. But if you flip through all the pictures Heather took that day, they're all kind of that way. And the take home point here is the difference between treated and untreated. This would be hybrid A.
This is actually C.
This
is a different one that you don't have.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So that's what my hybrid A would look like. So this hybrid was healthier, but did not have the top end that the less healthy hybrid. And that's every seed guy's dream. Every seed guy's dream is the unhealthy hybrid that needs management, that needs fungicide. When you manage it right, will out yield the healthy hybrid. And that's what happened here. Doesn't always work that way, but that's what happened here. But the point Heather and I wanted to make was the difference that less than 2 weeks made in this crop. Now you would obviously say, oh, I need to spray again. No, now you don't. It's too late to do any good now. And I would say even August 21st was too late, because the disease that is killing this plant was already in this plant on August 21st. And when it's already in the plant, spraying a fungicide on it isn't going to help what's already in the plant. Now, it will prevent more from getting in, but at this point, we already had enough disease in the plant to kill the plant. So we would have been too late. I'm not saying there wouldn't have been any benefit to the application at that point in time, but it wouldn't have been enough to justify treatment. And this is just to me a stark reminder that we have to be preventative with all these applications. You have to get the first one on before you can find tar spot. Almost, when Jim Donnelly and Rachel Willis can find tar spot and I can't see it yet, that's when that we need to be getting these applications made, because if you're already finding lesions when you're trying to scout, I don't even recommend scouting to spray fungicide for disease. I'm going to scout for a tassel, and actually Jim would say in Northern Illinois he's going to spray as soon as he finds tar spot or as soon as he finds a tassel, whichever comes first. And if he finds tar spot before tassel, he's going to spray before tassel, because he thinks it's critical to get that first application, and you want your first application to be your best application. If you want to skimp, and if you want to save money, and if you want to use a lower rate on that sequential application, I'm kind of okay with that. But that first one, at tassel-ish, this was 10 ounces of Delaro Complete. I would recommend 12. 12 would have been better than 10 in this situation. 10 obviously better than 8. The more the better, when we're having years like 2025 and 2021. Now, I think the ROI is almost always better on full rates than it is on standard rates, even when we don't have disease. So even in 22 and 23 and 24, when we had relatively low disease pressure, I was still seeing a much better yield bump from tassel time applications if we use the full rate. Also helps a lot with the streaking that we get from our aerial applications, because if you're putting on a heavier dose, even where you're not getting good penetration and good coverage out on your wingtips, which is where the streaks come from, poor coverage with a high rate works a lot better than poor coverage with a low rate.
I'm going to have you talk about one more thing.
Okay.
Wish I would have taken a different picture, but also the standability. Maybe we talked about this on the harvest date.
Right.
The picture on your left wasn't even the worst that was in this plot.
Right.
And some of those I didn't take a picture of because it was kind of almost embarrassing. But I wish I would have now, because it was all lodged, it was all leaning over,
and some of that
stability would have definitely impacted that.
And some of that would have been there were some 106, 107 day corn, so it's a little bit unfair to compare, the harvest intactness of 106 day to 118 day, but this plot got harvested really early, and that's the point that Heather and I wanted to make too, was that even though we didn't see what we thought we would see from that sequential application, where we would see a yield increase, had we harvested it a month later than we did, this plot got harvested really early. This has been picked for a month, So, had this gotten picked, yesterday, I think you would have seen a huge yield increase to the sequential application, because you would have lost a lot of yield from the other stuff that was more deteriorated. Okay, good deal. So, that the end of the pictures?
Yep.
Okay, all right. So now we're gonna look at some data from a couple other trials, so we can shut that off. I don't think we use the projector anymore. I'll just turn that off. Oh, I guess you got to push that button again. All right. Thank you, producer Heather. Okay. So, and that was some of your first introduction to producer Heather, and you now want her to host every episode, I know, but we appreciate her help greatly. So I'm going to talk about a couple other trials, and these are a little more traditional trials. These were both in the Monmouth area also. One of them was right here on the Bear Research Farm. That trial did not get any fungicide whatsoever. So this trial didn't get a V5, didn't get a VT. It just had to survive the best it could. And then the other trial, which was just about a half a mile down the road, similar soil type, similar planting date, it got a V5 and a VT. had 4 ounces of Delaro at V5 and 12 ounces of Delaro Complete at VT, and it was dramatically healthy corn compared to a lot of other corn in this area. The unsprayed plot got harvested about 3 weeks ago, and the sprayed plot got harvested 2 days ago. And so I've got yield information from those trials. And if we look at yield, so there's 22 hybrids that were in both trials. And the sprayed trial averaged 275.6, and the unsprayed trial averaged 245.7. So that would be just right at 30 bushel, response to that V5 and that VT application. And I would say again, for the Monmouth area, 245 unsprayed is pretty good. Now we're just slightly southeast of Monmouth here at the research farm. Rosine's trial would have been west of Monmouth, and Monmouth is kind of a tipping point. As you go east of Monmouth and south, things just keep getting better. As you go west of Monmouth and north, it keeps getting worse. So this environment here at the research farm actually was not as nasty with disease as you get northwest of Monmouth. So just going 10 miles northwest of here, it got a lot worse. But the thing I noticed was the yield range. So the unsprayed trial, there were 2 hybrids that yielded as well as the average of the sprayed trial. And the lowest yielding hybrid unsprayed was 210. So the range of that unsprayed trial was 279 to 210. The range of the sprayed trial was 288 to 262. So a bottom of 262 is a lot better than a bottom of 210. So the data is really tight on the sprayed trial. There's not dramatic differences in performance in the sprayed trial. So for 22 hybrids to range from 262 to 288, that's a fairly tight spread versus 22 hybrids that range from 210 to 279. And like I say, there were a couple hybrids that basically yielded the same unsprayed as they did sprayed. So there were a couple hybrids that actually would not have had a positive ROI to fungicide even this year, which is kind of surprising. But occasionally there are a few hybrids that are healthy enough that you see that. But every year is different. But what I wanted to do was kind of dig into this data and look at how the different management impacts the performance of the hybrids. And this kind of gets into the hybrid selection piece, and also want to talk a little bit about, how do you evaluate your fungicide program as well? I mean, it's kind of hard to do that, right? You don't know what a field would have done had you not sprayed it. Unless you left a check strip, which if you did, you can probably see where that is this year. But if you didn't leave a check strip, and assuming the whole field, and sometimes the field edges don't get sprayed, and up by the barn lot doesn't get sprayed, you can find those areas that didn't get sprayed. I've had pictures sent to me of underneath highline power lines where they couldn't spray, 100 bushel yield differences where they couldn't spray underneath the power lines. So you can find some of those sort of, unintentional check strips out there. But it's kind of hard to know. So in these 2 trials, we basically have an opportunity to compare hybrids, sprayed versus unsprayed, and see how that impacts the rank of the hybrids. So I went through, and in the with fungicide plot, I'm just going to rank them 1 through 10. 6835, 11789, 11303, 6606, 111.61, 109.71. A lot of new hybrids in these trials, so a lot of these numbers you may be unfamiliar with. Hopefully over the coming years you get familiar with them. Okay, so there would be the top 10 with fungicide. And I didn't do this. I should have done this. I don't know what the average yield of the top 10 would have been. But again, this was in a trial that the overall trial average was like 275 point something. So how about without? How many of these hybrids that show up on this list do you think will show up on the other list? And do you think the ranking will be different? And do you think it'll be completely different hybrids? So that hybrid was not on the previous list. That hybrid was not on the previous list. This one, ironically, was in the same position of both lists. This hybrid was not on the previous list. This hybrid moved up. This hybrid was not on the previous list. This hybrid moved up. This hybrid, actually, these two are trait isolines of each other. This hybrid was on both lists. And this is a trait isoline. And a Precion hybrid that was not on the previous list. So you can see there's quite a change in the two lists. And that's how people end up with such diverse opinions about product performance. Because if you're in an area where disease is bad and you sprayed fungicide, your list might look like this. If you're in an area where disease is bad and you didn't spray fungicide, your list might look like that. If you're blessed to be in an area with less disease and you sprayed fungicide, your list is going to be different as well. Or if you're in an area with no disease and you didn't spray fungicide, your list is going to change. So, and these are just two plots. You can't, and it's two plots of very different, they're in the same environment, but with completely different management. And so genetics by environment by management. So G by E by M. That is the secret to, product positioning, hybrid selection, predicting hybrid performance. So the genetics is the hybrid. E is the environment. And M is the management. And the management are the things you do. So that's, when do you plant it? Population. What fertility program do you use? How much nitrogen? Do you side dress? Do you spray fungicide? Do you not? What fungicide do you spray? What rate do you spray? When do you spray? Do you spray it with a high boy? Do you spray it with a plane? You spray it once, spray it twice, spray it 3 times. How do you manage that farm? And the interaction between these three things is where all the magic happens. So I'm gonna do this again, different way. So I don't want you to pick, if you find the perfect plot that was done exactly the way you farm, in exactly the environment you farm in, I don't want you to use that plot to pick your hybrids. So here's another way to pick hybrids. So 2025 Illinois region. Now Illinois region. So here is the state of Illinois, roughly. A circle about like that is where this data comes from. So there's some Mo in here, some Iowa in here, and a fair amount of Indiana in here with the ILL. Okay, so here's a hybrid list. 1499, 11303. And if you took notes, you might see some of these that you sound familiar and some do not. 6835, 11212. Make note of that one. Shows up on every list. why I like it. 1555, 117.89. Also shows up on every list. 112.35, 114.42, 66.06. So that would be the top 10 hybrids from this geographical area, all plots in our database as of last night at about 11 o'clock from 2025 only. That would be another way that you could pick hybrids. That would be better than either of the previous two lists because there's thousands and thousands of comparisons in this data set. So here's another way to do it. This is my preferred way. All years of data we have from this region. 1303, 6835, number one volume DeKalb hybrid in the country. So makes sense, it's high on that list. 11909, 6606, 11212, gets a star again. 11555, 11235, 10363, 11727, which disease poster child from 2025 moves up a lot when you include multiple years of data. So that would be all the data that we have as of 11 o'clock last night of how those hybrids would rank within this geography. Now, I will say this, in these data polls, these hybrids are not ranked head-to-head against each other. They're each compared to everything they've been compared against within 4 days, plus or minus relative maturity. So 103.13, this would be all competitors or all comparisons, and that could be Pioneer, could be Brevant, could be other DeKalb, could be anybody. It's all comparisons of everything from a 109 to a 117 that has been compared head to head against that. And this would be thousands of comparisons. So 6835, 118-day corn, that'd be everything from a 114 to a 122. 11909, that'd be everything from 115 to a 123. 6606, everything from a 112 to a 120. So you get the picture. And this is how we decide what hybrids we're going to grow and what hybrids we're going to promote to you to plant. We look at data across a fairly large, you might say, well, I farm here. I don't give two shits about what's going on down here. Well, why should you? You should, because next year they might have our weather and you might have theirs. And so what happens here can be relevant to what happens here. And what happens in 2025, what do we know about 2026, Heather?
It'll be different than 2025.
It'll be different than 2025. So what do we always do when we pick hybrids? We plant next year what we wish we would have planted this year. That's always wrong. Why is that always wrong? Because 2026 is going to be different than 2025. So you're actually going to make better decisions if you ignore 2025. Just ignore it. And you look at the average of 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Now, not every hybrid on this list has data from all those years because some of them are too young to have that. So this one up here, it has the least years of data of any hybrid on this list. This one has very little data compared to these others because it's 119-day corn, it's brand new, and it hasn't really been broadly tested in a lot of this geography. So it's that data would be coming from mostly down here. This is a new hybrid. This is a new hybrid. And it's a 103. So its data is coming mostly from up here. So it also hasn't been broadly tested in that geography. And this is new. So you got, and this that one's new too. So this one has the least data behind it. It is 1 year younger than this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. These are all brand new hybrids. The oldest hybrid on this list would be these two. So 6606 and 6835 are the oldest hybrids on that list. And then 11212 is 1 year older than the new ones, and 11727 is 1 year older than the new ones. So you've got hybrids of 4 different ages, on that list. And this is only 10 out of 100 and some that we sell. And there's a lot of products that weren't in these plots. So I'll call one out. 6422. If you planted 6422 this year, good chance that was the best corn you raised. But it's an older hybrid. We didn't put it in our plots this year. If we'd have had it in plots, I didn't include it in this analysis because it wasn't in the plot. I just did this analysis on these 22 hybrids that were in this plot. It would have made this list, I guarantee you. So here's the last thing I did with all this data. If you've ever wondered what I do when I'm not on Ask the Agronomist, I'm not farming, I'm geeking out on stuff like this. You wouldn't want to know how many hours I spent yesterday looking at data, getting ready to have this conversation here with you this morning. Okay, so here's what I decided to do. We looked at 4 different ways of picking hybrids. We had the one plot that got sprayed, ranked them. One plot that didn't get sprayed, ranked them. We had the 2025 Illinois region, ranked them. We had all years, ranked them. So we had four different columns. Actually, I have a 5th column here. And this is not the way you'd want to pick them. But I actually ranked them by response to fungicide. So if you like to use fungicide and you like to feel good about your investment, maybe you'd like to pick hybrids that give you a huge response to fungicide so you feel good about yourself. So here's that list, just for fun. And I would honestly say everything on this list, if you don't like to spray fungicide, I would suggest quit farming in Illinois. But if you don't like to spray fungicide, don't plant any of those. Because those hybrids all had huge responses to fungicide. I think I brought, I didn't bring this list with me. I actually had it figured. It was these, I think from here up, were all 40 plus bushel. And these two were over 50. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is on here. So yeah, I can give it to you. So yeah, this was 57. And again, this is one plot, so they're not always going to do this. 54, 50, 49, 48, 38, 37, 37, 33, 33. So those would be in those two trials. Those would be the top 10 responders to fungicide, and you do see some overlap. This hybrid was on a lot of the lists. This hybrid was on a lot of the lists. This hybrid was on the list. That hybrid was on the list. This one was. This one was. This one made one of the lists. So these were in some cases some of the higher performing products, and that's, like I say, that's the seed guy's dream, is that if you manage my hybrid correctly that needs management, you're rewarded with a high yield. When the hybrid that needs management can't beat the one that doesn't need management, that's not very exciting to you, because you're going to work harder and spend more money to get the same yield. That's not what you want to do. You want to, like this one, 11303, if you manage it right, it's going to reward you with some extra yield. 6835, same way. Those are the hybrids you're going to see represented in the NCGA yield contest results this year. Well, 11303 you'll see next year, not this year. Okay, so here's what I did. We had 4 columns. So these are the hybrids that appeared in all 4 columns. It's a short list. That's our number 1 volume hybrid for 2026 in West Central Illinois. We got that one right. This is a brand new hybrid that we do have a little bit of to sell for 26, but it will be more for 27. This one is also a Smart Stacks Pro, which doesn't necessarily fit the trait package that most of you are buying, but for corn on corn, acres for sure. And you may say, hey, I love the plant health so much, I'm going to plant that thing on bean stubble just for the plant health. Had a few more that ended up on 3 columns. That's number 1 volume in the country. 11303, 6606, and 11555. We had a few more that ended up on 2 columns, 11442. I don't know what it is about my brain. I write I write 114 weirdly. Did it right on 43. Those are isolines of each other. 11909, 5626. Really good 106-day corn. If you've never planted any 106-day corn, try some. 114.99. And then one list. So again, these are only on one of those lists, but again, that's even making those top 10 lists is I don't think I've ever been on a top 10 list in my life. So this would be like the Tom Brady list over here. He's like on every top 10 list. And then here's a really good guy that's only on one top 10 list. And then there's me way over there that didn't get anywhere near any top 10 lists. 1661, 1162. These are isolines of each other. 10971 and 11727. So on this list, there's a couple hybrids, and it'd be these 2 right here. They're having tough years this year. They don't like 2025. Those are damn good hybrids that don't like 2025. And the temptation, when you see a hybrid that doesn't like 2025, would be to never plant it on your farm in 2026. Resist that temptation to overreact that way. That's a mistake that we frequently make. So this was just a way of kind of looking at, and I would say, our data would say, as you move to the left, the products get better and better and better on this list because they show up good in every way that you want to cut and sort the data. And that's actually what you want to try to put on your farm. And that's what we're trying to breed for your farm, are products that are just always good. Now, that product has never been invented by anybody. And if you think you found the product that will always be good, you are mistaken, because everything can have a bad day, even heather. And if you've had a product that you've never seen it be bad, I guarantee you, I could find somebody somewhere else who has seen it be bad, and the environment that they saw it be bad in could show up on your farm next year. So we can't say that it could never be bad, but odds are, it's less likely to be bad if it was on that list And as you move to the left side of what I just erased off the board, it's less likely to, or more likely to be good, I guess is the way I put it. So have we had any questions, Heather?
No, we had a text to me though that somebody maybe disagreed regionally with one of your lists, Lance.
I see. Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, that's
Decide response.
that's because the environment changes as you move around. So no, that's that. I'm glad that people are seeing things different, because that illustrates the point that it depends on where you look what you're going to see. And you should not, no matter where you're at, you should not say that, well, what I see here locally is more likely to be what I see next year than what somebody else sees. That's actually not true. That's a lie we tell ourselves. The environment can change. So I got a plot from Fairbury. And I think if you look on a map, isn't that damn near straight east of here?
Yes.
And it's not that far. What, 100 miles?
Maybe. Yeah,
maybe. So 100 miles straight east, you could completely flip-flop the order of hybrids. And there's lots of 300 bushel corn. And the stuff that was at the bottom of my unsprayed plot here at Monmouth, making 220, 230, 240, is at the top of that Fairbury trial, making 300, 305, 310. And all that is a difference in environment. They had less rain over there and less disease. I had a grower that commented to me earlier in the week. He's seeing a trend on his farms. He said, I think we got hurt by too much rain early. I said, yeah, we did. You don't need 11 inches of rain in July. All 11 inches of rain in July does is, suffocate your roots and make tar spot and rust grow. It doesn't do anything good for corn. Doesn't do anything good for soybeans either. If you had less rain in July and more rain in August, that's going to be good for you. If we had plenty of moisture this year for record yields for everybody, but we didn't distribute it properly. And the excess rain that we had the last half of June and really the whole month of July, we had about a 6-week stretch there where a lot of people would have gotten 15 inches of rain in that 6-inch stretch. And then virtually nothing for the rest of the growing season after that. And we were really dry before the middle of June. When we were at national sales meeting, that's about when it started raining. And from middle of June through the end of July, a lot of people would have logged, at least 10, some places over 15 inches of rain. And then we had to get by on that through the rest of the season because we didn't get much in August and September, and still haven't had. They say it's going to rain this weekend, Heather. I believe it when I see it. But they're getting pretty ballsy about it. They're like 85% chance and like an inch. So that ain't no 500s kind of stuff. That's like an inch. So we'll see. So anyway, appreciate you joining us. I hope some of you were able to see something. I don't know what this looks like. I never watch Ask the Agronomist because you wouldn't want to look at this if this was you either. But I might have to take a peek at this one just to see what it looks like, because this is different for me, because the old way of doing it, I can see myself and I can see that I'm standing in the right place, and I can see that I don't have a horn sticking out of my head or anything. I can't see myself now, so that's a little bit. Not that I like to look at myself, but it is a little unnerving to not really know if you're still, because sometimes the broadcast is cut off, and doing it this way, I wouldn't know that. But that's why I got Heather here to tell me when we're off the air. So anyway, I appreciate the editorial comments of when I'm wrong. I appreciate that feedback. That's good. And thanks for joining. We'll be back again in a couple weeks. I don't know how we're going to do it 2 weeks from now. I'm sweating because I'm nervous because of how we did it this time. So maybe we'll do it this way again. Maybe we won't. If you got feedback, give us some feedback. I do like being able to show some slides, show things better. This is a way, showing pictures on a computer is way better than me holding my phone up in front of the camera on the computer. I think you can probably all agree with that. So maybe we're as Jennifer would say, we're growing, we're learning, Lance is maturing. So we're hopefully increasing the quality here on Ask the Agronomist. And thanks for your time and attention. And everybody stay safe throughout the rest of harvest. And we'll see you in a couple weeks. Whew, man.